The question, what is Gintama really about, has perplexed me because there are so many layers to this show. So I am going to unravel each and answer one of the greatest mysteries the world, no, the universe has ever faced. What's Gintama really about, you might ask? Well, I'll tell you. On the surface, Hideaki Sorachi's 2006 Gintama performs as a comedy manga, and the anime has become popular in the anime community thanks to its many memes and how it trolls the audience. Sorachi first began writing Gintama with the intention that it would be a slice-of-life manga that relied on a gag-like humor. However, the manga was contending against the big three and other mangas at the time, which made it fall in the ratings, and it almost got axed. To this day, Gintama's slow and jumpy start turns off viewers who start watching with the anticipation for a serious story about world-ending stakes and a protagonist who wants to become Pirate King, Hokage, and whatever Ichigo wanted, which I think by the end was for Ishida-kun to remain as his BFF. Sakata Gintoki differs. He isn't a man who in his first episode declares he will become Samurai King. No, he's this lazy, sugar addict who simply helps a boy save his sister from a life of servitude. The first episode introduces us to the nature of the odd jobs model and the flexibility it provides Gintama. The odd jobs model allows Gintoki and the crew to engage with a variety of characters who each have their comedic character traits and behaviors. The variety of the cast allows Sorachi to make comedic bits work. You have the Yoruzuya, the Shinsengumi, the Joy Rebels, ninjas, and the people of the Red Light District. Although there are a lot of diverse characters, the world itself is an agent in this comedy. Gintama being set in a futuristic Edo period allows Sorachi to blend sci-fi with Edo-era references and references to the modern day. For an example, he ties samurai to the Jedi Knights, and he has two characters who wield what he calls beam sabers. Okay, I've been hiding something from you. When it was a manga, and later when it was adapted into an anime, Gintama was perceived as problematic by some Japanese viewers. Because although since Shonen Jump advanced, there were quite a lot of jokes. A lot of the comedy derives from these dirty jokes, and the viewers loved it, because no other manga would dare to make a joke every single episode. The title, for God's sake, is a pun for testicles. Gin, which can be read as silver, or it can be read as kin, gold. And Tama, which means soul, can be read as balls. And so when you add kin to Tama, you get balls. It's a pun for balls. But people forgave it because there are truly golden comedic moments. Moments which have been analyzed to death. There's this one where Gintoki, Kundo, Kyubei's granddad, and Tojo are all trapped in a washroom that doesn't have any toilet paper. And so they begin to call for kami. Randomly, Gintoki finds sandpaper, and so it becomes a game of how to defeat or outwit your opponent with sandpaper. It's a bit that's quite well done. Sorachi is also able to squeeze laughs from faces and reactions. There's this face, and this one where Katsura infiltrates the police and is met with a man who is too shy to talk, and so he provides a friendly smile. Gintama also has Christmas specials. In one, Gintoki and Umibos appear as Santa, and so there is a competition for who the real Santa is. There are countless moments where the comedy clicks and laughter erupts. To a lot of viewers, there is no anime out there that can match Gintama's comedy, as it is seen as an anime that makes its viewers laugh their worries away. And in that laughter, one forgets about the world and feels happy. So Gintama may be about that laughter. It may have been designed to make the viewers laugh so hard that they forget about the pain and the suffering. Gintama used to be my escape when things got tough. I'd put on a comedic episode like this one where Kundo has a huge booger and laugh. I'd forget about the crushing stress and escape into the world of Gintama. To a lot of viewers, that's what Gintama is really about. It's about the laughs, the memes, and the jokes. To others, this makes the show base, shallow, and surface level. They click away and trash Gintama because it seems like it's only about the dirty jokes, the many anime parodies and the trolling. To those people, Gintama isn't only about the memes, the jokes, and the laughs. But there is a limit to how much I can now forgive Gintama for veiling some harmful ideas with jokes. So I think people are right when they criticize Gintama, and I cannot forgive it. Let me tell you what Gintama is really about. Gintama is a problematic Japanese anime that has garnered a fan base of conservative edgelords who try to convince people to forgive the show and not to think too critically about it. I was 17 when I first watched Gintama, and this first viewing has clouded my judgment, as for a long time I forgave it. I cannot anymore. Whenever I now sit for a rewatch, there are some episodes where the jokes go too far, and I am now aware of the homophobia and the transphobia. A lot of others have noticed it too, and when they brought it up on Reddit or on other discussion boards, they're told that Gintama is not PC, that Gintama is just telling a joke, and the viewer is just placing their Western judgments on Japanese media. That this homophobia and this transphobia is normal in Japan. And since Japanese society is so traditional with its gender norms, Sorachi is just simply following those norms. These arguments are weak because none of these conservatives have an inkling of how complex Japanese society is and for how many years Japanese people have been fighting for LGBTQ+ rights. They are instead like many other conservatives who use Japan as an ideal example of what the West should look like. A state that bars, excludes, and discriminates against foreigners, but also that it's a state that maintains traditional values. However, Japan's iron grip on the soul of its people is a myth. And there are many out there who are fighting for their rights and against Japanism. So now when I watch Gintama and I get to those episodes, I feel very uncomfortable about the messages, and I simply can't forget and forgive. In episode 24, we meet the drag queens, and Sorachi does right by punishing Gintoki and Katsura for calling Saigo a freak. Mademoiselle Saigo is a trans character who is portrayed in a positive light, and the episode ends with Saigo's son boldly claiming to his class that he loves his mom, who is also his dad, but also all the wonderful ladies that surround her. It's a cool way of normalizing gender fluidity, and this kind of presentation is illegal in parts of the USA today. Mademoiselle Saigo also has a powerful position in the underworld, and her club is a safe haven for those who do not conform to Edo's gender norms. Saigo thus uses her position to aid non-conforming people, and she offers them protection from the harsh world. Now you might say, well, isn't that quite progressive? Yet, as this person states, Saigo only became a mom and transitioned because of trauma. Trauma that stemmed from the death of her wife. It's almost as if Sorachi is saying that it is trauma and abuse that makes people trans or queer. Also, there are problems in how Sorachi's drag queens are portrayed. They are portrayed as these masculine monsters and act as burly men, and it reminded me of how Oda depicted the Okamas. It's a problematic portrayal of these people, but with Gintama there are the transphobic jokes that are thrown on these people. It sucks, and for people getting into the show, it is a hurdle. The other examples with Kyubey, the heir of the Yagyu clan. In Kyubey's flashbacks, we see that their father got a daughter, but after the birth, the love of his life passed away. So to maintain the ties to the government and to hold on to the elite status, their dad forces Kyubey to perform as a man and force them to become a macho samurai. Kyubey as a child, however, always wanted to be feminine and do girly things and be vulnerable. All of these things were stolen from them. This mirrors Saigo, as Kyubei's queerness stems from a child abuse and trauma. Again, is Sorachi basically saying that people are only queer because of trauma? Furthermore, we learn that Shinpachi is a giant homophobe, as he is directly against Kyubei marrying or even loving his sister, calling it impossible. Kyubei's gender dilemma later gets turned into a joke, as their creepy bodyguard, Tojo, finds a scrap of paper that alludes to them maybe wanting to transition. Sorachi turns this into a quest to stop Kyubei from seeking out the Tower of Babylon. He takes them from a place where the cast accepted Kyubei for who they are to this crude joke about transitioning and the need to stop it. By the end, the viewer finds out that Kyubei wasn't actually looking into getting a Tower of Babylon, but rather a gothic dress, and the butler was mistaken. Yet, when viewers reach this episode, many downplay it as a joke, a meme, and a troll, when in reality it is problematic, and I don't think viewers should simply brush it off. And people before me have pointed out these problems and have felt uncomfortable watching. Those who have pointed out the problematic nature of Gintama have been attacked and harassed online. To Gintama fans out there who laugh at these homophobic and transphobic jokes, you are disgusting. So disgusting that the Gintama Reddit had to point out the amounts of transphobia, biphobia, and homophobia and have stood against it. But is that what Gintama is really about? Not really. Let me tell you what Gintama is really about. Gintama is a story about a group of individuals who linger on the poverty line but never sell their souls to survive or get out of it. Although the odd jobs business could be used to make a ton of money, Gintoki and the crew never lower themselves because of their principles. In the episode we meet Hasegawa, Gintoki tells him that he isn't a hired gun or a person who could be won over by money, and that he wouldn't do the government's dirty work. Gintoki thus refuses high-paying government jobs and continuously doesn't make enough to pay rent or his workers. However, he is one of the lucky ones, as Otose, his landlord, doesn't ever charge Gintoki, and he pays his rent through other methods. Although Gintoki is lucky, he is still a poor samurai. Gintoki's class allows him to engage with the poor people of Japan with ease. These interactions are mainly seen through his friendship with the unhoused person Hasegawa. Gintoki first ruins Hasegawa's life, but they soon become best gambling, drinking, and philosophical buddies. It is through this friendship Gintama explores the lives of the poor and portrays them as human beings, as people. To my knowledge, there isn't an anime that shows the grim despair unhoused people carry in their everyday and how capitalism acts as hope. But Gintama does this, and it does it all through Hasegawa Taizo, a man who is seen to have no worth to society and is nothing except for a shirt and a pair of sunglasses. It is through Hasegawa's sunglasses that we see a class-conscious Gintama and a show that interacts and critiques elite society. It also brings the viewer to the hidden realities of capitalism, which are vastly ignored in many animes. That poor people exist and struggle every single day, and to many, they are invisible people. Sorachi makes these people visible. A lot of Gintama fans find Hasegawa their most favorite, and as you watch the show, you'll start to feel bad for how many times Gintoki and the gang screw up this man's life. He's also popular because millennials and Gen Zs just get him. He is seen as this useless person and is continuously struggling to stay afloat during economic hardship and economic downturns. There is a nihilism to Hasegawa, a sense of despair, a sense that life can't get any better and the world is going to shit because of wealthy capitalists. To those who like Hasegawa, don't let his nihilism fool you. He is a man who wakes up every morning and lives his life with hope. Hope that things may get better. Now is there a curse to that hope? The Anarchy Funhouse has already answered that. Although Gintama showcases the life of the unhoused, there isn't much rebellion against the upper classes. Like Gintoki and the gang befriend the very shogun, the most powerful man in Edo, and they don't really critique him or bring up the fact that there are people out there who are suffering from poverty, debt, and do not have a place to live. Now, this might seem unfair, however, there is the layer of the samurai class itself, and how in the late Edo period it dwindled and became useless. Yet, society still grips on the idealized, fictitious version. Who are true samurais? What is samurai? Who were the samurai? Let's put a pin in that, because maybe Gintoki doesn't get a real job because he has a vendetta against authority. In the Driver Monkey Hunter arc, where the crew gets transformed into screwdrivers, Gintoki and the gang become truck drivers, and life becomes stable. It becomes better. Yet, Gintoki tosses that life to get his back. He thus returns back to the odd jobs, a job where he is the boss and has some control over his labor. Gintoki is thus all about freedom, but a freedom from bosses and capitalism. But it's not anarchy, because Gintoki still carries responsibility to Kagura, Shinpachi, Otose, and the community. But is that what Gintama is really about? No, there's still more, so let me tell you what Gintama is really about. Gintama is the story of Sakata Gintoki, a healing and recovering war veteran. What is seen throughout its 700 chapter run is that Sorachi is not interested in the past, but rather the present, as he never gives the reader a full, linear backstory to his main character, Gintoki. Rather, the story of Sakata Gintoki is told through non-linear memories, and his change is subtle, from a cold-hearted, lost, apathetic doomer who saw no value to life, to a man who is surrounded by community and deeply cares for and about his friends. Sorachi begins Gintoki's story with him sitting on a pile of corpses, eating. It's implied by some readers that Gintoki as a child lingered around the dead because he was looking for a place to die. It's here where Shoyo meets Gintoki and teaches him his sword. Shoyo then carries Gintoki out of the setting of death and gives him a purpose to life. However, Shoyo also saw a monster in the boy, and so he tries to teach him the sword of a human, a teaching that Gintoki tosses away as the sensei would get captured by the guiding people of the heavens. However, as he was getting taken away, Shoyo makes Gintoki swear a promise that he would protect what Shoyo values most. His students and Gintoki's friends. Gintoki, Takasuke, Shinsuke, Katsura, Kotaro in their late teens run into the battlefield, fighting not to reclaim their nation or restore Japan or expel the foreigners, but to save their sensei. This is why Gintoki throughout the series tells people he never fought for the sake of his country. It's subtle. Gintoki thus becomes the Shiroyasha, a demon clad in all white, that each time he tore through enemy lines, he would get soaked in their blood, becoming a Yasha, a demon. However, Gintoki and his friends fail. They are captured and Gintoki is given a choice. He could save Shoyo by sacrificing his friends, or he executes Shoyo and saves his friends. Gintoki sticks to his promise and kills his sensei. It's a great twist, and after this, their paths diverge. In a lot of openings, they show this clip where Gintoki is roaring at the heavens and the rain is pouring down on him. This is the moment, Gintoki's lowest point. After this, he wanders looking for a place to die. He saves an ex-Joy and his daughter by getting captured and imprisoned. He is then tortured. His eyes are lifeless. There is no meaning to living, no value to his life. He is destined to die. However, the Shogun's executioner tells Gintoki that he is not a monster and he can become a human, echoing the words his sensei told him. Gintoki is freed and told to make something out of his life, and so he wanders, stumbling on the grave of Otose's dead husband. He thus returns back to lingering around the realm of the dead. It's here where he meets Otose and vows to protect her on her husband's grave. The Odd Jobs is born. He finds Kagura and Shinpachi. With their help, he recovers his soul. Once tarnished, it becomes cleaner, it glimmers like silver, and it becomes a beacon to others who are fighting against those who oppress them. Gintoki admits to his change when he's fighting against Kamui, where he states that he is Yorozuya Ginchan. Near the very end, Gintoki, for the first time in the entire series, has an ambition and something he wants to do. He journeys out and seeks out his sensei, who gets reborn into the world. Gintoki then raises Shoyo. The relationship gets flipped as Gintoki becomes the father figure. This leads to the final battle, where Gintoki has to kill his best friend, Shinsuke. And this fight differs from Gintoki's fight with Shinsuke in the Shogun assassination arc. It's a fight of tears, a fight of empathy and understanding. It's a fight that shows Gintoki finally moving past the traumas and towards a better life. His change is subtle and it's hinted at in small snippets, but the man the readers meet in chapter 700 is a very different man from chapter 1. Gintoki is thus a post-shonen protagonist, which is pretty cool, and by the way, all these events are out of order in the manga. You have to piece it together as you read, because the gorilla doesn't do linear flashbacks with Gintoki. This non-linear storytelling makes the reveal and the twist that it was Gintoki who executed his sensei, that he lost everything, way more impactful. It's why the Shogun assassination arc is so beloved and why the gorilla, this comedic writer, is so respected. There are times where he surprises the reader and makes them flip back to that first volume to meet Sakata Gintoki before he becomes Yorozuya Ginchan. But is that what Gintama is really about? Not really. Let me tell you what Gintama is really about. Gintama is not so great, and those who celebrate its so-called greatness tend to dismiss its problematic nature. First, there's the racism. There are only 3 black characters in the entire series. Well, not even 3. It's more like 2, as one of the 3 was the old Yorozuya's mascot. His position was equivalent to the dog, Sadaharu, and this image of him on his hands and knees gives off a really racist vibe. Like, did Gintoki walk this man around town? Because if he did, the action or the idea of walking a black man is akin to how white slave master treated black people in the States. Now, Gintama fans might say, it's a joke, it's a gag, and the context differs. It's different in Japan, but fuck that. The context does matter, and Sorachi should have known better what he was drawing was racist. The black mascot character ends up being Gintoki's partner, and they go off as a duo for some time, but this initial imagery is really racist and iffy. The second is an instance of blackface, and one that hits on the myth that blackness is an illness. Here we see Katsura enter the scene with a Will Smith disease. Now it's kind of funny because he echoes Obama lines and the voice actor apparently had a good time, but Sorachi is alluding to the myth that blackness is a disease that could be spread, and in the next panel, everyone has caught the Will Smith disease. In the anime, this doesn't really happen as it's a messed up, made up flashback, but these ideas are disgusting, and fans for the most part laugh at these moments without thinking about what Sorachi may be alluding to. I went digging around and found out Sorachi was trolling a youth survey on if Japanese people could differentiate Obama from Will Smith. Many youths couldn't tell the difference, which exposed that to many Asian people, black people look the same. Even with this context, there is a loaded history around this, and for those who are demanding proof, check out Mr. Rogers in a swimming pool with this black dude. Mr. Rogers demystified the myth that black people are diseased by sitting beside a black man on national television. Yet the myth appears again, and it seems like it's still alive today. Black people are not diseased. So fuck you, and fuck you, Sorachi, to the fucking pits of fucking hell. Another example of racism is how the show's initial premise revolved around xenophobia and how Katsura is a foreign exclusionist. But let's put a pin in that for now. The other things that fans tend to dismiss is how perverted, creepy, and gross Gintama can get. There are multiple panels where Gintoki is peeping at women, and like many other Japanese animes, is taken as a joke, a gag, but the normalization of this behavior is not great. There are other moments where Gintoki accidentally touches a female character without consent, and he does get punished, but like, why? Why is that in there? To male viewers, these are fun, but I imagine when female or non-binary viewers encounter these moments, there is a pause. Finally, Sorachi's anime and manga are littered with ableist slurs and some really dark suicide stuff. For the ableist stuff, I don't know if this is because of the fan translations, but when I was currently rewatching, it bugged the shit out of me. In addition, the careless mentions of suicide are also very uncomfortable. These are mostly attached to Hasegawa, the unhoused person, and I get it, it's dark humor, but there is a really disturbing amount of it. The continuous appearance of suicidality kind of counters the idea that there is value to poor people's lives, which Sorachi tries to hit on. But is that what Gintama is really about? Not entirely. Let me tell you what Gintama is really about. Gintama is an anime with revolutionary potential, as without historical context, the reader might mistakenly read Gintama as a story of rebellious characters who are rebelling against their time and a puppet government. Despite Gintoki calling Katsura a terrorist, readers who skip around can easily mistake the joy for Sakata Gintoki, the Shiroyasha, Tagasuya Shinsuke, the leader of the Kaheitai, Sakamoto Tatsume, the really loud person, and Katsura Kotaro, the runaway noble, as being simple rebels who joined the Joy War to save Japan from the alien invasion. The fan favorite Katsura is the main rebel who wants to make a better Japan, but this is a chaotic period, a period of civil unrest and civil war. However, the reader isn't fully at fault, since the idea of foreign exclusionism, which is introduced in Chapter 5 with Katsura, never gets fully explored. What's the aim of a foreign exclusionist? Well, our buddy Katsura here says it pretty plainly, as he says, "We are exterminating the filthy insects known as the Amont, kicking them off our planet, and then we will rebuild this glorious nation of samurai warriors." He then offers Gintoki the sword so he may join them to fix this rotten world. Gintoki refuses because he never fought for a rotten country in the first place. Katsura eventually changes as he befriends an alien called Elizabeth, and by Benizikara, he no longer wants to get rid of the aliens through terrorism and by sacrificing innocent life. This choice clashes with the most extreme, Tagasuya Shinsuke. Shinsuke and his group hold on to their foreign exclusionist beliefs, and this is why when Banzai clashes with Gintoki, he tries to sway Gintoki into the fold. He calls Gintoki a ghost, a person who doesn't want to restore or protect his country. Gintoki responds to Banzai, telling him that he never fought for a rotten country, and the thing that he wants to protect has never changed. So these revolutionary characters are in truth xenophobic people who blame the presence of foreigners solely on the aliens and not on the government that surrendered to the occupational force. Yes, Katsura and Teresi want to topple the Bakufu government, but the anti-foreigner rhetoric is everywhere in this initial struggle. This runs contrary to historical events. Sorachi also makes Japan into the victim here, but let's put a pin in that. It's been there for a while, so why unpin it? Centering the revolutionary struggle on exclusionism is very fishy, and one can argue that the samurai had every right to fight and dispel the invaders, the colonizers, and the occupiers. Sure they did, but this exclusionist rhetoric feeds into the current climate of Japan and how anti-foreigner it still is. Yes, Sorachi moves to cooperation between aliens and samurai in the Silver Soul arc, but the opposition to foreign exclusion could have been stronger and more present. So the revolutionary potential is there, and yet it is never utilized. But is that what Gintama is really about? Not really. Let me tell you what Gintama is really about. Gintama is an anime that is simultaneously copagandic and anti-police. There are evident moments where the Shinsengumi are glorified, romanticized, and made into heroes. And on the opposite end, Gintama showcases the facade of policing, the bloodlust in their eyes, the brutality and the corruption. Sorachi's romance of the special police unit can be seen very early on, as in an interview he stated that initially he wanted to make a manga centered around the vice captain Hijikata Toshiro. Why? Well, because Sorachi was fascinated by their historical counterparts. They were also his heroes, but they also stood as an example for what men should aim to be like. Despite being captivated by their historical versions, Sorachi's portrayal of the Shinsengumi is in reality a more liberal and quite loose interpretation. Isao Kondo, the captain, is this creepy stalker gorilla. Hijikata Toshiro, the vice captain, is a tobacco addict and a mayonnaise addict. And Okuta Sogo, the captain of the first squad and one of the best swordsmen, is a sadistic, bloodthirsty murderer. Sorachi thus turns these historical figures into comedy figures, and many Japanese people did not like that. Sorachi is also not very honest early on, as he makes it seem that the Shinsengumi answer to the Amant or the foreigners, when in fact the Shinsengumi were a Ronin police force that were created to protect and fight for the shogun, and not for the foreigners. Why did Sorachi change the chain of command? Well, maybe it's because the historical shogun differs completely from the shogun of Gintama. But I'm skipping ahead. There's a pin over there for a reason. There are moments that do romanticize the Shinsengumi, like whenever Hijikata talks about how Kundo rallied up a bunch of country ronins and formed a police unit. This early romanticization gets shredded later on. Despite romanticizing them, Sorachi also shows that the Shinsengumi and the cops in general do not care about the lives of ordinary people and are tools of the state. During the Farewell Shinsengumi arc, we learn that people in the shogunate picked these Ronin samurai and gave them swords so they could play a game of cat and mouse with the Joi. The idea runs similar to what happened historically, but the Joi are framed as terrorists and the cops are saving Edo. This game of cat and mouse alludes to the facade of policing, but also that the real job of the Shinsengumi is one of suppression of the opposition and their supporters. This is historically true, as the shogunate wanted to suppress the Joi movement and the calls to kick the foreigners out, and to change the political structure of Japan. The Shinsengumi thus stood against the Meiji Restoration, and it's kind of why in Japan, for the most part, they were really not a big deal historically. However, Sorachi does show a level of complexity of how police units were organized in Edo, Japan, as he introduces the Mimiwagari. I cannot say it. They're this elite version of the Shinsengumi made of elite samurai. In the anime, Sorachi has them join with the Joi patriot Shinsuke, but historically, Usiboro hated the Joi and fought in the final battles to the bitter end. Although Sorachi does deconstruct and critique the Shinsengumi, they do have a very romanticized exit and have this bombastic return in the final battle. My verdict is this. All cops are bad includes the Shinsengumi, and viewers may feel like I'm being a bit harsh here, but the only reason Sogo, Kondo, and Hijikata are liked is because Sorachi humanizes them and has them befriend Gintoki. If we tear the comedic veil, they are cops, and cops who wouldn't hesitate to mow down a crowd of deserters. But is Gintama simply a cop show? No. Let me tell you what Gintama is really about. Gintama is a multifaceted allegory. On one hand, it's an allegory for the late Edo period, when the Tokugawa shogunate ended its 200 years of isolation. This historical event became known as the opening of Japan, which was caused by American and Dutch intervention. On the other hand, the sword bans and the total disarmament of Japan by the aliens is an allegory for a Japan post-World War II. That's quite odd though. There seems to be a giant historical period that is missing. It's almost as though the Japanese are the victims and that they didn't oppress others. How very odd. I guess it's time to remove that pin and explain all of this. So back to the first hand. The aliens we see in the beginning, the dogs who shoot the palace, are the Americans. The shogun, unable to match American military might, surrenders and a colonization of Japan begins. Now historically, Japan is not fully colonized like how it is in Gintama, because the samurai and the Joi rose up, calling for people to revere the emperor and to expel the barbarians. The barbarians here are the Americans and the Europeans. In a sense, the Joi, as xenophobic as they were anti-imperial and anti-colonial. However, they were not progressive or revolutionaries or leftists because they bowed down to the emperor and wanted to usher in modernity and capitalistic reforms. Those who led the rebellion against the shogun, the Shinsengumi, and the Bakufu government were Katsura Kotaro, Sakamoto Ryuma, Takesuke Shinsuke, and Yoshido Shoyo. Shoyo historically was the one who taught Shinsuke and Katsura the Western methods of war to expel the Westerners, assassinate government officials, and the shogun. Of course, Shoyo gets captured, imprisoned, and is executed by a Saimon. The show explores Shoyo's life in a similar light, as the historical Shoyo taught these rebels in a prison cell, and Sorachi shows two instances where Shoyo teaches in prison in the anime. The Gintama Shoyo differs, as he is not executed by a Saimon, but by his student, Sakata Gintoki. Now back to the history lesson. Shinsuke and Katsura tag team to fight and assassinate the shogun. The shogun, unwilling to let go of the power, uses the Shinsengumi to crack down on the Joi. But the shogun, using outdated samurai tactics, loses to Shinsuke and the Joi. The emperor steps in and backs the Joi as they win battle after battle. These L's add up and the shogun resigns, and the emperor, Meiji, ushers in the Meiji Restoration, a time where Japan politically reorganized, modernized, created the imperial army, and began to industrialize. This period is a time remembered for its prosperity, eventually leads to the invasion of Korea and the colonization of South Asia. The foreigner exclusionists of Japan take power and thus mirror the Western powers to create their empire. Thus, this video ties back to my Attack on Titan video. From studying this, I noticed how messy this period is, and how anti-colonial sentiments of the Joi have gotten lost in Gintama. In Gintama, the Joi go to war to overthrow the government, but mostly fight hordes of aliens, and their xenophobia is one that mirrors modern Japan. This generalization of alien is dangerous in the current climate. With climate, refugees, stateless people, the wars in the Middle East, and that war in Ukraine. Let's pause here. Those who get labeled as alien is very interesting, as conservatives often label fleeing Arabs from war zones as aliens, and yet gracefully embrace white Ukrainians. Ukrainians are not aliens, for they are white and civilized, but those Arabs sure are alien-like. Hence, for a big chunk of the story, Gintama oozes a xenophobic rhetoric, and I bet conservative viewers loved it. Where the show splits from history is that the Meiji Restoration and the foreign exclusion does not occur in Gintama. In the Silver Souls arc, we see Katsura Kotaro, Sakamoto Tasme, and Hasegawa Taizo make peace with the aliens. Japan does regain its sovereignty, but the aliens, or the foreigners, are included in society. This is a quite positive way of retelling history. Yes, it's ahistorical, but the message is positive because in reality, the Meiji Restoration did exclude foreigners, and it's a policy that remains intact in the year 2022. However, the Japanese of Gintama seem to be in a perpetual state of victimhood, as Sorachi jumps through time, omitting how the Japanese would attain power and oppress and colonize others. Instead, the samurai have lost their swords and their soul due to the sword ban, and so there's a message of restoration. That to protect Japan from aliens, the samurai must regain their sword and repel the invaders. If this is solely pinned to the Tasegawa era, it's fine, as they're fighting against their colonizers. But if Sorachi is using this message because he thinks it's wise for Japan to restore its militaristic capability in the modern era, then it's problematic. Now you might ask, yeah, but doesn't Japan need its military to defend itself from communist China? I'd answer back by saying, that's a great question, but if China wanted to invade Japan, what's been stopping them for the past 60 years? Maybe it's because Japan is armed to the teeth by Americans. Furthermore, if Japan restores its military, then what? The next step for those who want to restore Japan is a restoration of empire. This is what Tasegawa refers to as Japanism, the Japanese form of fascism, which is super prevalent in Attack on Titan. So historically, that's what Gintama is really about. It's a messy allegory for the end of the Edo period with a mix of post-World War II disarmament, but I don't think I've truly reached the soul of Gintama. So for the final time, let me tell you what Gintama is really about. Gintama is an anime that is all about seeing with the heart and the soul. However, it's not only about seeing, but living life with a clean soul and a pure heart. Gintoki in almost every arc talks about the soul and that it is the reason to why he is spurred into action and does things he wouldn't do. Walking into the oppressed city of Yoshiwara and facing the monster Hosen is not something Gintoki wants to do, but rather he does it because if he doesn't, his soul would tear apart. The heart and the soul are thus things that must be continuously polished, as they are like a piece of silver that only glimmers when it is cleansed. The sense of morality, this idea that the soul gets unsettled when it faces injustice, connects well to how leftists feel about the world. We are bothered by the very fact that capitalism is enslaving people and killing them, that people are losing dignity, and for what? Wealth. We are bothered that the world is burning because of a capitalist greed. We are bothered by white supremacist states that train police to brutalize, terrorize, and murder civilians. How can you not be bothered? How can your soul not tear apart with this knowledge? Gintoki seems to be walking a libertarian path, as he walks his own path and does his own thing. But he isn't an edgy libertarian, but a person who values community. In walking and engaging with the people of Kabakushu, Gintoki forms a bond with a variety of people, from Shinpachi to Kagura to his war buddies to the transgender community, to the unhoused, to the elites of Edo, to cops who are suspicious of him, to fire personnels, hard-boiled detectives, to whatever Hedro is, to hosts, to ninjas, to courtesans, to the Yakuza bosses, to the very Shogun himself, and finally to his lifetime enemy, Shinsuke, and his mentor, Yoshido Shoyo. By the end of the show, the viewers see the bonds that were built pay off as a vibrant community forms around the odd jobs. A community that is forged from the heart and the soul. One that would not hesitate to help those who are in need or those who are oppressed. Gintama is thus all about love and peace. And yet Gintama is also goofy, transphobic, homophobic. It is class conscious, it is sad, it's not so great, it's revolutionary, but it's also Copagandic and ahistoric. The soul of Gintama is made of all of these things, for all of these things make up the layers of Gintama. Woo! Welcome to the end of the video. This video was a big one and I tried to be as fair as possible, but in my reread there were some things that rubbed me off. I am curious to know what you think Gintama is really about. What are your thoughts on Gintama? Am I right or am I very, very wrong? I'm also very curious if my viewers have encountered Gintama fans in the wild. Anyways, If you enjoyed this video, consider subscribing for more, or don't. You know, if you're feeling the vibe, do subscribe. But if you're not, then I don't know. I'm not really gonna force you to do it this time. But you know, I worked really hard on this video, like really, really, really hard. Like I spent a week editing the audio. A week. Or check out my Patreon where I post cool behind the scenes things of how I make these videos. Anyways, I'm gonna go rewatch some Rami and think about my next video. Yallah, salam.